Welcome to the Trigger Warning Talk podcast, where we discuss triggering conversations. These conversations are uncensored. We exchange information, got a ton of it, and we also provide resources. So, for anyone who's going to be listening to this podcast, produced by Penton Pending Consulting Solutions LLC, is being brought to you. We're using StreamYard right now, but this podcast is going to be available on all major platforms, audio and video, through Anchor, Spotify. It's going to be available also iHeartRadio, Google and Apple Podcasts, Podbean, anywhere that you get your podcasts, wherever you get your favorite ones. So Amazon Music, Audible, we're everywhere. And we're even going to be expanding into more places that I just found. That being said, again, if you are triggered at any point during this podcast, because we do trigger warning conversations, call 911. If that is not something of an immediate need for you, we have a bunch of information that's going to be listed in the show notes. So the trafficking hotline and website, domestic violence website and phone number. We have the sexual abuse phone number and website. We have for those that are experiencing substance abuse issues, whether it's alcohol and or drugs. We have Alcoholics Anonymous, their number, Narcotics Anonymous, their number, as well as Al Anon for those that are supporting those individuals with alcoholism or drug use. There's a new 911 number that's available some states that's going to be available nationwide July 16th of 2022. That number is 988. Again, 988. That's the 911 number for suicide issues. So there's going to be some other information that we'll have in the show notes. As usual, we do a missing person case. So once our guest drops off the interview, we're going to cover an extremely important case of a young woman who works for the government. She's a postal worker. She was 8 months pregnant when she ended up being missing. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later on in the show. But right now, I want to introduce my friend Mary Huang. She is a important individual that's going to talk about her experiences dealing with domestic violence and sexual based offenses. She is a divorce recovery expert who helps single moms break the chain of poverty and consciousness and create generational wealth. She founded the Rise from Divorce Academy, where she teaches women how to build strong foundations, mental, emotionally, spiritually, and financially. She also is the author of two international bestsellers that are on Amazon. The first book is called The Empowered Child. She shows parents how to raise conscious, confident kids, and Set Sail. That book is all about turning trauma into points of power. She shared the stages with some big name folks like Les Brown, Deepak Chopra. She also is part of an award winning documentary called The Weight of Success, and she's featured on award winning podcasts like The Tao of Self Confidence, Asian Women of Power, and Mommies on a Call. And when she's not writing her next magazine article, which I want to be in one of these articles, Mary,
Yes.
you'll find her attempting to beatbox under her two young daughters' tutelage. So we'll talk about that. She has a mini course that's free. It's called Five Keys to Get Your Power Back After a Divorce. And that's on her website, marylwong.com. I'll have her information as far as contacts, which is primarily her link tree address in the description notes. Mary Wong, how are you doing today?
I am blessed. I am so grateful to be here with you today, LP. Thank you so much for having me. And honestly, for having a show like this, I wish that I would have found your show in existence back when I was a teenager. I needed this. I needed this so badly. And I just appreciate you for hearing the call to serve humanity like this. You're making a big difference. So thank you so much.
Mary, let me see your chain because we titled this podcast Chainbreaker for a reason. So if
Yes.
you are not going to be watching this podcast, you're going to miss the prop, but we'll explain it in some great detail. And actually, and in all seriousness, is a very important piece to not only her story, it also is a reminder that you can break the chains of bondage mentally and emotionally. And we're going to talk about that. And that's why this podcast is entitled Chainbreaker with Mary Huang. Mary,
Yes.
you know, 75 to 80% of the podcast that we do is not about your brother LP, it's about the guests. I'm going to turn the mic over to you because I want to hear you tell your story about how you overcame domestic violence and sexual trauma and some other things. The mic is yours.
Thank you, LP. And I appreciate our conversations back and forth too. So I don't have to take the show, but thank you for the mic. Thank you. I understand what you're saying. It's all about sharing our stories. You know, you're giving a platform for people who turned trauma into victory. And when you share these human stories, people who listen get ignited, get awoken, get inspired, and realize, you know what? If she survived and thrived and became victorious, then I can too. And that's really the whole purpose of these conversations that we're having, right? Is to inspire others to know that there is hope. Because the worst thing we want is for people to feel hopeless. And if we allow the external world to bombard us and receive the bombardment of all the negativity that's happening out there right now, it's very easy for humans to just throw in the towel and say, why bother? Let me just give up. Like there's no point. But there is a point. The point is to protect yourself, your energy, your mind, your heart, your body, every part of you that makes you you from these external forces, whether it be abusers that are your closest people or even environments or media. You know, we have to be so intentional about what we allow into our sphere of our mind, our energy, our homes, where we work. It all matters because everything is connected. We're here right now, but all those places that you're disseminating information through makes us connected instantly. So everything is connected. So my story the victory that I got from my story is a victory for anybody who wants to take it. Take it, please. It's for the taking. So my story began very early on as a child, being born straight into a household of abuse, and abuse being so normalized because that's just the way it was, not realizing that this was not healthy, not only abnormal, but this was not life affirming. It was the opposite. My father being a highly successful, global businessman, but a narcissist, and a mother who was also had narcissistic tendencies and borderline personality. So that combination made it was a war zone. My brother and I grew up in a war zone. Every day, the only thing we could count on was that there was going to be a war between the parents every single day. And I was lucky that I had an older brother that was my buffer, my protector. And so for him, I say a lot of prayers for him because, when we go through a lot of trauma, sometimes we don't remember, the brain will not remember things that happened before a certain age because it's protecting you from the trauma. And so that's what happens to humans. It just protects us. And I'm grateful that I had him because then it allowed me to have a little bit of a safer passageway. But I still didn't come out unscathed. As a child, being happy-go-lucky like we all are, and then to be abused sexually by my father, his father, at 5, 6 years old, it just changed everything. Because kids don't know how to say no. Kids don't know maybe that it's wrong, that they have a right. This is and especially from immigrant parents that came from a culture of like, I was going to say oppression, but authoritarian type of parenting methodology where what I say goes. And so there's no room to have a voice in that kind of dynamic. And so that went on. And another thing that happened was my mother had kidnapped us when I was 10 years old out of America and brought us back to Taiwan because their marriage was breaking apart. And so she stole us and took us. And then she was so distraught, she took me to the top of an apartment building's rooftop, held my hand and said, hey, come on over to the edge. look over the edge with me, and threatened for us to jump. So at a young age, I knew that I had to learn these very important skills of reading body language and energy, and know what to say to be safe. And so I just knew in that moment I had to say whatever I had to say
Absolutely.
to save my own life. Yeah. So then we come back to America, and they were working so hard, and I give them credit for working hard. They earned their way up the ladder and got the dream home, a mansion. But then they quickly, when I was 13 and my brother was 16, threw us a checkbook across the kitchen counter and said they were going to Taiwan, but they forgot or didn't tell us that they were never going to come back. We never got a memo, and we didn't have any adult guardians. And it was really, the heart was just constantly waiting. My heart was just waiting and waiting and waiting, because I didn't know any moment they could come back. We were holding down the fort, and responsible for a very large estate at a young age with no life skills. And that was really hard. And the way that I coped was drug abuse for 10 years. Drug abuse, self-medicating, all different types. And that might have actually helped me, but I don't recommend that. I recommend going to find a therapist. But I didn't know that that was an option, even though it wasn't until I studied psychology at New York University that I got the beginnings of some therapy. But I was still in denial, because I was groomed to have eyes and ears but no mouth, and keep all of that abuse behind closed doors. And when parents, you have to understand, when parents verbally program you in that way again and again, the child takes it on. You're under a hypnotic command, basically. And I never spoke about the abuse that was happening, because I was commanded not to and believed into it. So a lot of people out there, if you're listening and you feel like you're blaming yourself for not speaking up sooner, I mean, it's not uncommon not to. And then the shame and the self-blame that comes with it, it's so much intertwined. You really do want to get professional help to help you unravel that and heal that one piece at a time. Otherwise, it's all melded together. It's really hard. You really need someone on the outside who understands, who's trained in that field and that topic, to help you pull one thing out at a time and look at it. And that's the journey of healing. Don't expect yourself to be able to go from, oh, I heard a podcast, I read a book, I should be okay now. No, there's no shoulding. It's like, get some guidance. No, there's not a set timeline. There's no final destination. We're constantly evolving, and accepting that things happened, and now we can do something about it and learn from it and heal, and then maybe get on a podcast, share your story, and be that inspiration to someone else. And it's not just one other person. It's going to be lots of people hearing your story. And that's really how to turn your pain into something purposeful. Yeah.
This is the Trigger Warning Talk podcast. Again, uncensored conversations. We say what it is. It is what we say. We don't do fluff on this podcast. I say all the time, fluff is an action word. Is what you do to pillows. Is what you add to cappuccinos and shit. It is what it is, you know. And so these are adults talking to adults about some specific triggering conversations. So if you're triggered at any point during this podcast and you need immediate help, please call 911. If you don't need immediate help but need resources, they will be listed in the description of this podcast. Mary Huang, being a young person, having that responsibility of being your own parent, being the parent slash big sister to your brother, having all this financial responsibility, even though you had basically a blank checkbook to feed off of, which a lot of people don't have that, you still encountered a lot of additional trauma in being abandoned by your parents. I know when you talked to me before and you talked about being molested and being sexually traumatized by your dad and your granddad, Did any of these things happen with your brother, as far as
He's
you know?
never he I only have a feeling, but I've never brought that up, and
Okay.
I don't I have a very strong feeling that yes, but again, like he has no memory before age 10, like zero, and I just feel in my gut that it's a yes. Yeah.
Here's why I asked that. I'm on a mission to get men to talk about their shit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on a
Mm-hmm.
mission to get men to open up about the good, the bad, the ugly, and the indifferent when it comes to sexual trauma, sexually based offenses, from touching to penetration. It's all relative.
Mm-hmm.
I want men to get past the emotional suppression that we're taught as boys. And forgive me, anybody that wants to come at me because I'm not being gender neutral, come at me. So, what I want to say to you is I appreciate you being open up and having the candor and the strength and the courage to talk about these things because I know they're not easy. And I want to thank you so much for sharing your story. When it comes to boys and men in particular, as someone who's experienced this type of trauma, let's just deal with the sexual trauma.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to men, or what would your message be to men in regards to dealing with those traumas?
Whew. Man, I mean, I think even allowing yourself to question acceptance, to even spend any mind space thinking about it, and like even putting your mind in the direction of that topic, right? It's so scary. It's so big and heavy and dark. There's so much shame. There's just so much attached to it. And it's not your fault. It's not the victim's fault.
Right.
Never was, and it never will be. And to get professional help, because that's what helped me get through it. I'm a healer. I have a psych degree. I've helped a lot of people. But when it comes to that topic, I needed someone professional who specializes in that, who's a therapist to help me through it. And that's my recommendation. You really need a professional to help you. And it's okay. Like for me, there was a pathway to getting that therapist, to understanding, oh my gosh, I actually need a therapist, right? Maybe whatever you're most comfortable relating to, whatever safest space you can get to, whether it's a coach, whether it's a domestic violence center, whether it's some other type of healer, a hypnosis healer. Like there's so many types of healers, or it's a
Absolutely.
doctor, right? Like talk to someone, go there and have that safe space where you can begin to open the door. And it's at your own pace. You don't have to rush.
That's
You
right.
the most important thing, like that first step is the hardest. That first step of like even wanting to open it is the hardest part. It takes the most courage. It's like anything. The first time, going skydiving or bungee jumping or a trapeze, or maybe as a kid jumping over from like one side of the creek to the other side. Whatever that first time of doing something that took so much courage and bravery to do, that first step is the hardest. But once you do it, you realize, oh, it didn't kill me. In fact, it actually felt better. There was a release of pressure. There was a release of that tension of fear of like, am I going to land in the river, or am I going to make it on the other side? And you make it on the other side and you're like, okay, I want to do that again. And then you do it again and again in the care of someone who knows how to care for you in that way. And you'll see your life change. Yeah.
Let's deep dive some more because our podcast is about deep diving. We got scuba gear available. You want to snorkel, whatever you need, we got you. Because we don't do the iceberg conversations, the 10%, which is the uncomfort that people use as triggering. Now, It's the 90% that's under the water that you don't see. That's the triggering stuff. We
Yeah.
need to flip that iceberg upside down because that's where the shame, the guilt, the judgment, the pain, the trauma, you
Mm.
name it, that's where it lies in that abyss. Let's either flip it upside down and make it front and center, or let's put the snorkel and scuba gear on and go underneath the water and address it because it ain't going nowhere. Just because you
True.
can't see it, it may not be happening actively right now, but it's still playing in your mind. It still has a big part of what you do in your daily activities. It plays a part into your mental psyche and all of those things. I want to turn it towards the women that you focus on.
Mm-hmm.
You are a divorce recovery expert and you help single moms break the chains. We go again with the chains.
Chains. I got to show it again every
Let's do
time
it
we
again.
talk about it.
So we're going to be talking about chains throughout this.
Yes.
You help single moms break the chains of poverty, consciousness, and create generational wealth. I would imagine that a large number of your clients who are soon to be single moms experience domestic violence,
Yeah.
experience sexually based offenses in their marriage. I'm not talking about before they were married to this person. I'm saying in that marriage. How do you address those issues with those women? Do you address those issues with those women?
Mm-hmm. So the women that come to me, it's not so much sexual abuse, it's verbal abuse, it's narcissistic abuse, it's
Sure.
psychological warfare. Um,
Because that's all under domestic violence.
it is. It is. It is because it leads to sometimes it starts there and then very often it'll progress into the physical abuse. So some of them have had physical abuse, but the majority of them are actually middle upper class women who gave up their careers to raise a family and slowly became devalued and then financially controlled. And so I have very commonly clients who drive Mercedes or the latest car, and they are living like my story, the $1 million life, like actually co-created $1 million life. But on the outside, it looked perfect. But behind closed doors, they were verbally abused, mentally abused, emotionally, psychologically, all of the above. And sexually, maybe not raped, but the pressure of you're not giving me enough, so I'm going to go out and get it.
Right.
So that kind of pressure of, well, I'm providing, so you have to do this for me. And so it's a very maybe modern way of control. I don't know if it's modern, but I don't know the word that I'm looking for. A little bit more covert, maybe, is what I mean. It's
Okay.
like control either way. And these women find it hard to leave because they're worried about the children. How can I provide the same lifestyle for these children when I can't even access the money that I helped the family create? And so that's why I'm so lit up about supporting women in these situations, because the lower income category have governmental support. The
Okay.
super high income category have assets that they can,
Liquidate or
access.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. But the middle class really suffers, and the middle class is so big. These
Sure.
people are working so hard and they get trapped, and then it just escalates. So, how do I help them? Giving them a safe space to understand that there are resources out there, you know, getting that mental state stable. First of all, letting them understand that, like, education, what is actually happening in your dynamic. This is actually abuse, because it starts off like, well, I'm not sure if it's abuse. Like, they don't even give themselves the permission to recognize what's actually happening. But it ties all the way back to childhood, because if a person it grows up in trauma and abuse, whether receives it firsthand or observes it, it's still trauma and abuse. And so that's a program in their subconscious mind, like the iceberg, actually, it's the program is running like a record, like a software. If our brain is a computer and we have a software, whatever we were implanted with and programmed with between the ages of 0, 7 to 9 is pretty much the range they say, is the program that keeps repeating itself through life. And so when a person becomes married and finds himself in that situation, the healing process goes back to self-discovery, discovering what happened in the early years, what happened actually even before that, intergenerationally. So it can get really, really deep. The kind of chain breaking we're talking about is intergenerational. And so if I may share my story, a piece of my story right now, because it really connects,
Absolutely.
is that when I woke up to the fact that I was in a marriage that was no longer safe, I remember standing there in my kitchen floor in my marital home, and my ex did something that was unthinkable, that I realized it just woke me up like someone threw cold water on my face. I had to very quickly strategize and decide, how am I going to get me and my 2 children safe? And the
Yes.
Domestic Violence Center educated me. They were the ones who showed me that this was a bad situation, and how do you get out? How do you have a safety plan? How do you create a safe word? Who is going to know what? And who's going to know what to do when you say the safety word? So all of these things had to be put in place. And then fast forward 6 months, I grabbed my kids and we fled to a town that we didn't know a soul. But it was the healing journey there was all about going back and rediscovering those parts in childhood that I had still yet to finish healing and tie up. And with the help of a therapist, I remember one image was me trapped, me as a 5, 6-year-old that was receiving that abuse, trapped in a glass cube box, all like scrunched up in this little box. And the way that she got me out was brilliant, because at the time, my littlest one, my youngest daughter, was about the same age. And she said, well, what if she was trapped in that box? What would you do? I can feel the emotions right now. I turned into this like unstoppable bear. I was just like, I'm just gonna, like this lion. I'm just gonna go over there and smash that box, and like that helped me. That was just one of many sessions over a course of 1.5 years of healing. But that liberated me. We have to go back to these moments again and again in different ways. But that was one really impactful way that liberated me from that girl that was in the box screaming for help, but everybody walking around, nobody could hear me. And yeah.
What form of therapy was that?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what category of therapy that would be called, but a therapist, a licensed therapist.
It wasn't like CBT or anything like that, cognitive behavior therapy, or it
It's
almost sounds
probably,
like
that's the first thing I thought of.
it sounds like it has some components of NLP in a sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's why I
I do.
asked, because what I want to do is I want to introduce these metaphysical forms of therapy
Awesome.
that are unlike the untraditional sit on the couch Q&A. You got 45 minutes, go, or whatever. There's Reiki, there's hypnotherapy, there's
Okay.
NLP, CBT, there's EMDR. I can go on and on and on and on. I bring people on this platform that specialize in all of those things. And so I'm always excited when I hear people talking about those, because they're non-traditional, but they're effective. And
Very.
actually, they tend to be more effective than traditional forms of therapy that we think of, which is the sit on the couch, here's your hour, talk, question, answer. So that's why
I'm
I
so
asked that.
glad you said, I am so glad you said that, because that opened a door of permission for me that I didn't know I needed. But I am certified in NLP for many, many years. And that's the primary way that I help people, because it's so rapid. You don't even have to relive the trauma. You just go in and take out the old software and put in the new software. In fact, it's kind of fun. You're just like watching a movie and things are happening. And I help men too, actually, not just women. It's just kind of
Okay.
bonus when people refer men to me. I help everyone. It's just that's my
Sure.
specialty. But a mind is a mind, a brain is, it
That is
all
a line.
operates the same way.
That's right.
Um,
If I need a kidney,
right.
here's what I say to people, especially when I talk to guys about mental health therapy.
Mm.
We're all humans, right? If your brother LP needs a kidney, and Mary is not only a match, she's a willing donor because you only need one. My grandmother was born with one kidney. So she's still around.
Wow.
If Mary's a willing donor and she's a match, hallelujah, your brother
Mhm.
LP is going to live. It's not going to matter that it's coming from an Asian woman because she's a human. So when it comes to therapy, the same shit. Different folks, same strokes. Whether you're a guy or a woman or whatever you identify with, or whatever your identification is, gender wise, it does not matter. What matters is seek help. Again, this is the Trigger Warning Talk podcast. If you're triggered at any time and you need immediate help, call 911. We're going to move on to the next topic, and that is, and I forgot that you're an NLP practitioner. I just did a session right before we got on our meeting, and we'll talk about that later. But it,
Awesome.
it, it was something that was really refreshing for me. And I was like, oh, wow. Like she just ruined my whole appetite because we were talking about food. Anyway, Mary, you are a two-time international best-selling author. You wrote The Empowered Child, and then the other book that you have is Set Sail. I want you to talk really quickly about Set Sail because it's about turning trauma into points of power. What do you mean by points of power in terms of chain breaking? Where's your chain?
Yeah, Chainbreaker. Ah! What I mean by that is, challenges, traumas, tribulations, these are obviously difficult and they can put us down into a pit. And if we can understand that it's part of human nature, the human experience, that we will go through that, and that intergenerationally, trauma is being passed down through the DNA, not just the color of our hair and our eyes. It is coming down from the beginning of time of our lineage. And so if I am a vehicle in this lifetime that's holding all of that, and I've taken the trauma, transformed it, alchemized it through all the different ways, all the spiritual, esoteric ways, plus the traditional ways, all the different ways, because they all matter. Because we are, first and foremost, a spiritual being, a spirit with a soul and a human body on the planet, here to
Right.
fulfill an important destiny that only we can. And part of that is breaking the chains of what our ancestors might not have learned, or whatever trauma they endured and didn't have the tools to transform before they died. And that now we are a collective manifestation of all of that. Well, instead of just unconsciously passing it down, because we're alive during a time where so much information for transformation is at our fingertips. Just go on YouTube, call one of the people that, on the list of resources that LP gives every week. There's a lot of people in your area that can help you. So we don't have to fear being in the pit. I'll tell you, in one of my sessions where I was getting healed, I saw myself in a pit on a mattress with a blanket, getting all cozied up, because that was my comfort zone. I was too comfortable being thrown in the pit every time I tried to rise from the ashes, until I realized, let me just fill up that hole. I don't need to be in there. But although it can be lighthearted, because these are deep topics that are triggering,
Sure.
we can also be light about it, because if we don't, we'll be stuck in the pit. But the pit is a real place that we can get stuck in. But when we understand that every time we heal and transform, we become a different version of ourselves for our lineage and our future generations. And that's why it's so important to me that I light that up and awaken the chain breaker and the torch bearer in every person who hears this or hears me or reads about me or anything. That's like my life's mission, is to really wake that part of each human up, because that's what we were designed to do. You can apply it differently to different missions. Like one of my missions before a legacy I want to leave behind is a single mothers co-op village, where women coming out of abuse with children can come here to a safe space. And it's a big vision, growing your own food and, a real co-op village type of place to get back on your feet and break these generational patterns. And that's important to me before I die, to leave that behind. So that's what it's about. That's what it's about, chain breaking.
Mary, I want to just continue this conversation because there's so many other things that I want to talk about. What I want to do is I want to invite you back. I want to invite you back to talk about how you practice NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, right?
Tongue twister, yes.
Tongue twister. Neuro-linguistic programming.
Yes.
Maybe I'll let you do a session with me, because I want to
Sure.
see if NLP practitioners kind of do the same thing, because we're all different. No matter, I'm a medic. There are people that are medics that I work with that totally do stuff different than I do, even though they're following the same kind of protocols or whatever. I got a whole different approach that works for me, you know. So I want to have you come back and we're going to do an NLP practitioner session. And I want to have a conversation more about how NLP works with traumas specifically. So that'll just be a whole show in and of itself. I
Very
want to
important.
ask you, and this is what we call our shameless plug section of the podcast. I want you to talk about how people can get in touch with you. We'll have the information available. And also, I have an end question for you. So let me give you the end question first. And then, no, you tell us how we can get in touch with you. And then the end question, which is, if you were to write a letter to your younger self, what would you say? So, how can people get in touch with you?
All right. I would love to connect with everyone further. You can follow me on Instagram at Rise from Divorce. That's my handle across the board on all platforms. And if you want to find out like the latest of what I'm up to, where I'm speaking, what I'm doing, what I'm promoting, you can go to Linktree/Mary Huang. So it's linktr.ee/Mary Huang, and you'll be able to find everything there. Now, to answer that really brilliant question, I think it's a great one that everyone who's listening can really practice for themselves. I think regularly, maybe once a quarter, once a year. What would I say to my younger self today? Oh, that's brilliant. I would say, no matter how hard and scary and terrifying it feels right now, just know that everything has a purpose. Everything is happening for you. If you choose to see it that way, then you can make it so. And now that I'm here, I want you to know that you actually made it to the other side successfully. And it's with that mindset, the mindset, and then surrounding yourselves. Look for mentors. The younger me didn't know to look for mentors. If you can find the mentor who has already overcome, succeeded in the area that you want to, and latch on and absorb it, you will get there too. And you will have many mentors throughout your life. They're just like, it's like they're holding the new chain you want to go to. And you're just like linking up with them. Oh my gosh, that's brilliant, LP. It's like you want to break the chain from where you came from. Just because you inherited doesn't mean you're stuck with it. Science has proven that. Is so amazing. Trauma or high positive emotions can change your programming around the main genes epigenetically. So you can
Jeanette?
do that for good. So if you just break that chain from the passive abuse or whatever you're not into, then you look for a mentor who's succeeded and then you link onto them until you've reached this point and you need another mentor. Then you go find another one and you link it on. Every mentor knows that your mentee isn't meant to stick with you forever. Maybe they become your friend or colleague. So that's my advice.
Mary just gave me chill bumps, like for real. Like I'm just like seriously. I was like, I thought it was the fan, but I'm like, no, it's just what she said. I want to thank you so much,
Thank
Mary.
you.
Like seriously, we got to do some more projects together. You know, I got a whole bunch of ideas. My ADD kicks in, and I'm like, man, I didn't think about that. Let me write. Like I got a ton of like my notebook here. Like I'm writing down all kind of shit. So we definitely gonna have you back later this fall. We definitely want to do some more projects with you, and I just want to personally thank you for having the strength, the courage, and the wisdom, not only to overcome the shit that you went through, to be there for your brother, to be that living example of, you know what, we're not going to let this chain that we got wrapped around us sink us to the bottom. It's not
Right.
going to be tied to this anchor that's been dropped into the abyss of this ocean. We're going to break this fucking chain and we're going to
Mm-hmm.
overcome and we're going to get past all of this stuff, the stigmas, the taboos, and the stereotypes, and we're going to be better for it. Just stick with me. I got you. That's real love. That's getting back to our humanity. And that's what this podcast is all about, getting back to our humanity. Mary Huang, you have a heart that's made of platinum. And I love you and I appreciate you. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
I love and appreciate you. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. That's Mary Wong, folks. Definitely check her out on her social media platforms. We'll have that listed. Buy her books. I'm going to be doing some shopping because at the end of the month, that's when payday happens. And I'm a book fan. I'm surrounded by books. You can't see it right now, but I'm getting both the Empowering Child and Set Sail. That's going to be added to my collection.
Thank you.
Mary Wong, folks. Definitely tap into it. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
We're going to switch over to the last portion of our podcast, and that is the missing person component. We're going to cover a story that Mrs. LP, who's our residential true crime detective, and a lot of people don't know, she specializes in helping find missing persons. She's been involved in some high level cases, but she's the person that doesn't charge people for the stuff she does. The people that she gets involved, she doesn't collect any fees for. A lot of these organizations do it for their own purpose of helping folks, and you never see her at the press conferences. It's always the people that she assembled. I want to bring on the screen here a story about a postal worker that Mrs. LP told me about the other day. And I thought, wow, this is a great story altogether. Her name is KIERRA Coles. And I want to play the story. I think I got it all queued up here. Hold on a second. Because, oh, that's the wrong one. I'm sorry. My bad. This is from Twitter. So the video that I'm going to play is from Twitter, but the story comes from blockclubchicago.org. And I'll have the link to the story in the website and on the podcast information. So let me bring that up here because let's see. Let's share that screen. All right. One. So Kiara Coles was, again, she's a postal worker. This happened in, I believe, 2018. But I'm just going to play the story. So just listen in.
KIERRA, when she was a little girl, she always did a lot of talking. She wanted to be in TV, radio, something so everybody could just hear her voice. KIERRA loved makeup. She even started doing makeup for people going on proms or just going out. KIERRA loved taking pictures, but she loved putting on clothes and just taking pictures all day, every day. KIERRA loved dancing and taking videos of her and her friends. You know, whenever they went out, just laughing, having fun, making memories. She always wanted to work at the post office. She did seasonal positions for about 3 years. She kept saying, I'm just going to keep trying. Every year they're going to see my face until they finally decide to hire me. In about 3 years, she was hired at the post office. She loved her job. If I could use one word to describe KIERRA, it would be ambition. Because everything that little girl said she was going to do, she did. She didn't care how long it took her to do it. She was going to do it just to prove that her word meant something. KIERRA was 26 years old when she went missing on October the 2nd, 2018.
On October 2nd, 2018, at approximately 10:43 p.m., KIERRA Coles was seen on surveillance video making 2 ATM withdrawals at a business in the 8600 block of South Cottage Grove. KIERRA, a postal worker who was 3 months pregnant, exited the business 3 minutes later. These are the last recorded images of KIERRA.
The last time I talked to KIERRA, she was at the wig store. She was asking me what should she get, what type of milk, what type of fruits and veg. I mean, she was just so excited to be pregnant. I can't never forget that day because that was the last day I talked to her and heard her voice and heard how happy she was to be pregnant.
2 days later, on October 4th, the Coles family filed a missing persons report for KIERRA. While attempting to locate her, officers forced entry into KIERRA's apartment, but she was nowhere to be found.
Even when I had the police come and do a well-being check to see if my daughter was in her apartment okay, it was a wreck for me then. I couldn't even stand up there. As they was taking the screws out the door, I couldn't even stand up there. My heart was beating so fast, my hands were sweating. I thought I was going to walk into something that I didn't want to see, to the point I had to go outside and catch my breath. And the boyfriend and her stepfather, they stayed up there with the police. Then when they came downstairs and told me she wasn't in there, it was like a big relief, like, okay, thank you, God. Then that's when I thought maybe she just went outside. She didn't want to be bothered. She'd just be home in the morning.
Chicago police detectives and the United States Postal Inspection Service began a joint investigation.
So after we made the police report, it just was days of searching and passing out flyers and praying. Sometimes when people get pregnant, they have mood swings, which I was praying that that's all it may have been, was a mood swing. She just didn't want to be bothered with nobody for a couple of days. But here I am, almost 3 years later, and I still don't have my baby.
After canvassing for video and analyzing the hours of footage obtained, detectives were able to piece together a timeline of the last few hours before KIERRA disappeared on October 2nd. During the course of that night, KIERRA entered her residence in the 8100 block of South Vernon. A man who detectives identified as a person of interest also arrived and entered the residence. KIERRA and the man later got into her car and drove off, with KIERRA in the driver's seat. KIERRA was seen making the ATM withdrawal on surveillance video just minutes later. Less than an hour later, the vehicle is seen arriving and parking in another area of the city. The person of interest exits the passenger side of the vehicle, but nobody exits the driver's side. The next day, the person of interest is seen parking KIERRA's vehicle near her residence before entering the building and exiting with unknown items. He then drives away in his personal vehicle that was parked on the block overnight. When officers questioned the person of interest after KIERRA was reported missing, he gave varying accounts of the last time he saw her. Detectives cast a wide net for evidence that would lead to KIERRA's whereabouts. Many of KIERRA's family and friends were interviewed. Social media accounts were reviewed. A forensics test for blood evidence was conducted. Her personal computer, phone records, and financial records were all analyzed.
The worst thing a parent can go through is not knowing whether their child is safe, warm, fed, being treated right. It's just heartbreaking. It's just an emotional wreck to wake up every day. Sometimes a song could remind me of her when her friends post them in her videos. You know, I'm just looking at her, wishing it just was the day, and I'll see her later. It just took a big mental toll on.
For more than 3 years, KIERRA's loved ones have had to live with many unanswered questions. We need your help to shed light on her disappearance. The Chicago Police Department is committed to finding out what happened to KIERRA. We will not stop until we can bring her family answers. KIERRA deserves this. Her family deserves this. Please call.
I need help from anybody out there that may be watching this to help bring KIERRA home. You know, her family and friends miss her. We all want her home safe. Anything you may know, whether you think it's nothing, it could be something. If you know something, please say something. I'm begging you as a mother that have to wake up to a reoccurring nightmare every day wondering where my child is. Is she safe? Is she hungry? Is she cold? Did she have her baby? Is he or she okay? We just want KIERRA brought home safe. So if it's anybody out there with a heart and you could feel what I'm saying and you know something, can you please call in and give anything that you may know, even if you think it's nothing. It could be something. You could be the one that helped bring KIERRA home.
All right, so that's the story about KIERRA Coles. If you have any information about her whereabouts, good, bad, or ugly, or indifferent, you are asked to contact the phone number that they have listed. Is 312, this is a Chicago area code, 312-747-8274. Again, 312-747-8272. You can go onto the website, C as in Charlie, P as in Peter, D as in David, tip.com, CPD tip, which is the Chicago Police Department tip website.com. Again, any information, good, bad, or indifferent, contact Chicago PD or call the number that's listed, and we'll have that information in the show notes. Again, I want to thank my guest, Mary Huang, for joining us and staying with us for our missing person case. We love you, Mary. And again, live in awareness, don't live in fear. There's 7.5 billion of us on this planet. We're not going anywhere. There's always help available, as Mary said. Be the chain breaker. Don't let the chain break you. And with that, LP out.